And it really is wonderful to have you here. But one of the things that I'm asked most often is, why do they do X or why do they do Y? And I don't have all of the answers, but I can maybe answer some of your questions. And I think this is most appropriate this week after we've been through Deflategate. And we're now preparing for the blizzard, and we're preparing for the elections 2016. We already had everybody in Iowa visiting this week, and they all head to New Hampshire, and now we have Miss Universe tonight, and of course we have the concern about the selfie with Miss Iran and who is she next to and what's going to happen. And we're all so attuned to everything that's going on now, and a lot of it is because of the media, because it's everywhere, and we are all exposed to it 24/7. So I thought I'd talk about our changing media world, and I teach at Emerson in Boston 2 days a week, and I've been doing it for 5 years, and it's one of the favorite things that I get to do now that I've retired from my other career, because I get to deal with the next probably generation of journalists, and I'm scared. I will tell you. I'm frightened because for them, everything is instant gratification. If you have your own children, your own grandchildren, everybody has this. And it's great because I have a son who's in college and a daughter who's in college, and before I came today, my daughter called me and said, I have some kind of a rash and something's wrong and I don't know what it is and I'm going to go to the health center. And I said, okay, send me a picture of what you look like so we can see what it is, and text me. And I texted her friends and everything. So it's wonderful that we have this communication, but it also is something that the next generation of journalists has to deal with. And it's something that we have to be so careful of because we get our information from so many different sources. Think about it. We used to go home at night and wait for the 6 o'clock news. I used to wait for the paper boy to come. Now, he was very handsome, so that was probably one of the reasons I waited for him to come, no word of a lie, but also because I couldn't wait for the Westerly Sun to come. And it would come at 5 or 6 o'clock every night, and I was so excited just to see what had happened in the community. But now, you don't have to wait for the Westerly Sun to come. You don't have to wait until 6 o'clock to see the news because it's on all the time. So you're getting all of this information. This next generation of journalists, they think it's fine to not wait for anything to come out, to not wait for something to be printed. They just put it all out there. And you ask what their filter is, you can see not much. And you also can see that it comes from many different sources. And to me, that's a concern because you always need to source where your information is coming from. And I see this next generation not really worried about where they're getting their information. So that's one of the things that I try to talk to them about, is the importance still of the basics. And I think that no matter what you're doing every day, you have to remember the basics, right? So when I'm teaching journalism, it still is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. The 5 W's and the H. So that's what this presentation is based off of. Who uses media? Well, we all use it for some type of our day for some reason. In 2013, the San Diego Supercomputer Center and the University of California in San Diego made a prediction that by 2015, where we are right now, that the sum of media asked for and delivered to consumer on mobile devices and in their homes would take more than 15 hours a day to see and hear. And that volume is equal to 6.9 million gigabytes of information, or a daily consumption of 9 DVDs worth of data. Okay? Now think about that. I love this slide because it really puts it into perspective how much time we spend in front of something, in front of a screen. You even get into your car now, and what do you have when you turn on the ignition? What are you looking at? A lot of you are looking at a screen, right? It's a screen that gives you the GPS. It tells you what your tires look like. It tells you how much gas you have. It gives you all of this information. My father used to say, our biggest concern going forward, and the thing that's really going to trip us up, is the amount of information. We're going to have information overload. And I used to think, what is he talking about? Well, we're here. We have information overload now. Everywhere we look, everything we turn on, we're getting information. So how do we sift through that information and utilize what we want, as well as make sure that it's the correct information. So I thought that this was an interesting fact, 15 hours a day. When you do ratings, and quite often you'll hear people talk about ratings, ratings are done generationally. So you'll hear somebody talk about the Nielsen ratings, or you'll hear somebody talk about on the radio station that they're the #1 show. So you look at the generations and how they're defined. So the millennial generation are those people born 1981 to 1997. So right now, they're the 18 to 34-year-old age group. Those are the people that most of this media is really targeting, because those are the people with income, those are the people that are going to be making the buys, those are the people that are consuming the most media. So right now, everything is going towards the millennial generation. Then there's Generation X, those people born between 1965 and 1980. So right now, they're the 35 to 50-year-olds. So that's this group here. Okay, so we're all the 35 to 50-year-olds. So I can't say I'm in this group anymore either, so I figured we could all just enjoy today. So the 35 to 50-year-olds, that's more of the disposable income. Okay, that's where maybe you're feeling a little more confident, you're going to buy that car that's a little more expensive, you probably own a home or are looking to buy a home, so you need the appliances, you need everything in it. Then you look at the baby boom generation, 46 to 54, and they're now 51 to 69, so that's where I fit in. So I look at this and I think, okay, 51 to 69, where are we in our careers? What are we doing? A lot of people are looking towards retirement. So if you watch on Sunday afternoon, you may put on golf because we're concerned about, it's cold here, so let's see what it's like in Hawaii or wherever they are. And what kind of commercials are you seeing? You're seeing the luxury vehicles. You're seeing the high-end appliances. You're seeing the high-end clothing, you're seeing that type of thing. And that's because they've already vetted who's going to watch that type of programming. And that's why those commercials or that type of media is used to reach that age group. Then you look at the silent generation, 1928 to 1945. Now it's called the silent generation because of the silent movies and because of what that used to be in that age group. They're now 70 to 87. Okay, so you're probably now looking at a different kind of vehicle. You're looking at living somewhere else, probably traveling. So you'll see maybe more airline commercials. You'll see more commercials that are geared towards all of those, and no disrespect to the doctors in the room, but all of those things that you can take to cure one thing, but the side effects are going to kill you before you ever get to, I think, what it is. So you sit there and you listen to it and you think, wow, I never want to take that drug because I'm going to be sicker than I already am. But that is the type of thing that you'll see in the afternoon when you look at the noon news, because people are home watching the noon news who are older people, right? You're probably not at work anymore. You're probably not doing that type of thing. And then, of course, the greatest generation before 1928. Tom Brokaw really coined the phrase, the greatest generation. He's the one that does all of the documentaries on World War II, really takes care of that generation. And that generation is not really consuming as much media, but that generation, believe it or not, are big texters. Any idea why that generation will text? Grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And you find that a lot of these people, and the Verizon store here in Westerly will talk about in the afternoon between 12 and 2. Whenever I go somewhere, I always ask a lot of questions. And I was talking to the man in the Verizon store, and he said, oh, between 12 and 2, he said, we have all these people because they come in and they know it's our downtime, and they want to come in and know how to text. And they're people who are usually 80 and over. They want to know how to Skype. They'll bring in, a lot of them got these for Christmas. They have no idea. They say, thank you, oh, we can't wait to use it. The grandchildren, great-grandchildren leave, and what do? They have a box, right? So what do? You need help. So they go to the Verizon store and people talk to them and help them do that. It's a great communication tool for the greatest generation because the other thing it allows us to do is to preserve history. And we need to preserve that history. Many of you are probably familiar with the piece that we just did for the Babcock-Smith house, and we actually have them available to buy today if you'd like to buy one. The Built from Stone book and Carved from Stone, the DVD. And for me, that was such an honor to be able to work on that project, but also I got to preserve the history of Westerly. I got to actually sit down and talk to Mr. Camoli and talk to Mr. Smith and actually see what they did and hear what went on in Westerly. If we don't preserve that now, we're not going to have that for the next generations. So I'm very pleased to see that the greatest generation is still involved in giving us this information. As many of you know, talking about war and those types of things was something that no one was ever comfortable with, but the more that other people are doing it, it seems to be okay now. So that's a breakdown of who the people are that are actually watching and consuming these media. So you ask, what is media? Okay, so there are different types of media. There's broadcast media, there's radio. Radio still is alive out there. I started my career in radio. I encourage all of my students to go into radio first, and I tell them that it's the best thing to do because, of course, everybody wants to be in TV, right? That seems to still be the big thing they want to do. And I say to them, if you can tell a story through only words, and someone can close their eyes and they can tell that story and feel it, then when you get to TV and you're given the pictures, you write to the pictures that you're given. But radio is such a great, great thing. A lot of people now are listening to NPR. Are there NPR listeners in here? It's a great way to tell stories. It's a longer format. And it really is something that this next generation is starting to listen to. I have my students listen to NPR so they can familiarize themselves, first of all, with the radio. And second of all, and it's funny because I will say to them, how many of you have TVs in your room? I would say maybe if I had 30 students, maybe 3 have a TV in their room because nobody watches a TV anymore. They may have one in the common area, but you watch everything on this. So I think the optometrists in this world are going to be fine because everybody's going to be like this. But, you know, it really, nobody has a TV anymore, so it's interesting. Print, everybody says the newspaper is dead. I will tell you the newspaper is not dead by any means. There are still people who want a newspaper. I have students that I'm encouraged all the time who say, I can't wait to get the newspaper and look at it. And it's because they want something that they can look at later on. I mean, the Sunday paper, how great is the Sunday paper? The Sunday New York Times, my husband will tell you, it will sit there for a week, and he's moving it from place to place, thinking it's going to get to the, to the wastebasket. But it will sit there for a week because I can read this, I can do this, I can put it down, I can come back and consume it. So print is not dead by any means. It's taking different forms, but it's not dead. Online. A lot of things are online now. A lot of you probably get your coupons online, you get information online, and social media. Social media is a big thing nowadays. So why do we use media? We use it to be informed. We use it to stay on top of current events so we can talk about Deflategate, right? It used to be a water cooler conversation. How many times did all of us talk about it, the water cooler when you take a break at work? There aren't water coolers anymore. Everybody has a plastic bottle with them. So this is the water cooler, but they bring it with them to social media. So now you have conversations on social media. So you want to know what's going on. You want to make informed decisions. Okay, when you buy that car, when you buy that refrigerator, you want to make informed decisions. When you go to the polls, right? When you go to the polls, how important is it to have that information? And we use it to be entertained. What makes news? People still say to me these days, why would that be news? Why would anybody care? Why is that news? Well, there's a criteria that we use when you try to determine what is news. And there were events that changed the way we covered the news, okay? What is this one? JFK. That was one of the turning points in media and the way that we changed the way we covered news. okay? That was because people in this country wanted to be part of that. They felt like they had really lost a friend. So they wanted to be part of it. So you saw more TV coverage. You didn't see wall-to-wall 24/7, but pretty close to it. What about this one? The glove. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit, right? Okay? Gavel to gavel coverage. Okay? Gavel to gavel coverage. How many people in this room remember watching part of the O.J. Simpson trial? Okay, if you were at work, then you'd come home and you'd try to catch up on it, right? When I was at Channel 6 in 1985, 86, there was the Klaus von Bülow retrial. Do you remember the Klaus von Bülow retrial? The first trial was actually held in Massachusetts. The retrial was held in Rhode Island, and I actually was at Channel 6, and I was chosen to be one of the co-producers on it. And they actually used the Turk's Head building in Providence for the media headquarters. And CNN was just becoming a big thing, and they had a truck that rolled into town that had CNN on the side and the big satellite dish that was there, and they parked it on Benefit Street in front of the courthouse. Well, I mean, that was amazing, you know, that you could actually be sitting in California and watch the Klaus von Bülow trial on TV coming from Providence, Rhode Island. And it was just interesting to see how that evolved. Today, we're looking at what? The Hernandez trial, okay? We're looking at the Boston Marathon bombing trial, right? Those will be gavel to gavel, okay? You can watch that at any time of the day or night now. But it's not like the O.J. Simpson trial, because this one you had to really get into it, and you had to find it every night. Now you can find Hernandez, you can find any of those 24/7. You can sit at work, you can sit at your computer, you can watch it streaming. This really changed the way people learned about the court system. It was a good thing in a lot of ways. There were a lot of people who went to law school. After this trial, law school enrollment went way up because people were so enthralled with it that a lot of students, especially in California, went to the courthouse and tried to get in. You watch what happens now in Boston. Suffolk Law School, a lot of the professors have actually assigned them to go to the courthouse and talk to the prospective jurors as they come out after they've been given their actual questionnaire, and then they talk to them. What makes a good juror? What doesn't make a good juror? Okay, and they'll be following it, but they can follow it online. They don't have to go to the courthouse every day. What about this one? 9/11. I was at Channel 10. It was in the morning, and I'm sure we all remember, just like we did with JFK, this generation remembers where they were during 9/11, okay? And they all know where they were. And every Tuesday morning there was a department head meeting, and my boss was in the department head meeting, and there was a bank of TVs. If you watch Channel 10, you can see all the TVs in the background. Well, we were standing there, and somebody said, look, something hit the World Trade Center. And then they went on to something else, and then somebody else in the newsroom yelled and said, you know, there's something going on there. And Art Lake was still at Channel 10 at the time, and he came out and he said to me, I think you better stand back here and watch this because something is going on. We would get the live feed of the Today Show, so when they went to a commercial break, we actually would watch what they were doing and changing things. And Art used to watch that. He loved to watch that because they'd go in the back and they'd, have a cup of water, or the microphone wouldn't work or something. And he used to love knowing all the ins and outs of it, and he'd love to come out and report it to us. And he said, I really think that this is something. So we watched that feed. And there was a black box that used to sit on the assignment desk. And that was the black box from New York. And if there was a special report or something was coming, the black box would come on. Well, the black box came on and said, all NBC stations, be ready for a special report. Something has hit the World Trade Center. It's a small plane, we believe, but we're monitoring the situation. I ran in, I got my boss, I said, something's going on. The TVs were on where they were, and that's when the second plane hit. And we knew, we were at work for days. We knew that this was something that we had never experienced before, as the whole world did. And this was something that people were glued to their TV, not just to see what was happening, but also to see if they could see their friends and relatives. Because remember, a lot of people couldn't get in touch with people then, right? So it became something that people watched for. Another time that this happened was during the station nightclub fire. It was 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. It was cold, it was February, and I had just gotten home. Very rarely did I go out at night back then because I had 2 small children, and it was, I'd get home probably about 7:30 at night, each night. And it was a friend of mine's birthday, and we had all gone to the Muse in Narragansett. And for some reason, it was a little later. It was about 11:15 when I walked in, and the light was on upstairs. And my son was watching TV at the time, and I think he was about 7 or 8. And I said, "Christopher, what are you doing?" And he said, "There's a big fire." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he had a scanner at that time. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "But I can hear the calls coming in." And I listened to it for a minute, and all of a sudden, the phone at the house rang. And I picked it up, and they said, "There's a fire. It looks like it's pretty bad. You need to come back to work." So I immediately jumped in the car, and I got from Westerly to the station in Cranston in 32 minutes. Okay, I'm not proud of it, but I will tell you, there was not a police officer on the road because everybody was there. And as I approached where you actually can go to 95, or you can go straight if you're going to the airport on 95, you could see the red in the sky from that fire. And by the time I got to the station, we had a photographer who's still there, and we called him Sparky. And he was friends with every firefighter around. He worked the overnight shift. In fact, he's celebrating his 30th anniversary at Channel 10 this week. And he called me, and he said, "Betty Jo," he said, "we've got at least 50 people that have perished." And I said, "How could this be? This just happened." And he said, "I'm telling you, the ambulances are here. There are at least 50. And he said, "I'm telling you, it's going to go higher." So we were in the 11 o'clock news. We stayed on the air until 8 o'clock the next morning. And probably one of the biggest things that I learned out of that as a news director was that we are providing information to other people because we're providing it as a source of information because people couldn't get to work. People who needed 911, there were no ambulances around. They had closed Rhode Island Hospital, which they frequently do if there's something big going on, a major accident or something. They'll shut it down because they can't accept any more patients. They then shut down Kent County. They then shut down South County, and the hospital that they had to go to was Westerly. So if anybody else needed anything in the state, they were shipping them to Westerly. So you knew the magnitude of this. But it also was the number of people who didn't know about their loved ones and what had happened to them. And people would come to the station throughout the night, and they would be banging on the front door because we had doors that locked automatically. And they would be saying, "We need to come in. We saw my son on the videotape that you were showing. We saw him back there. We need to know. We need to make sure he's okay." And as the night wore on, you knew that those people did not see their loved one. And you knew what the outcome was going to be. So I had to step back as a news director and say, okay, what are we doing? What are we showing on the air? And I always had a rule, and I said to them, don't you ever, while I'm here, put a school bus accident on the air before we know where that school bus was going, who was on that school bus, was it full of children or not? And don't you ever let me hear you say, we're following this breaking news and we'll give you more information. I said, because I can't imagine being a parent at home, putting a child on a bus, and you tease there's been a school bus accident in Rhode Island, we'll tell you about it at noon. I mean, what is that like? So I took it as a responsibility that you have to be careful what you do. 9/11 was like our station fire. People would see their loved ones walking across the bridges. People would see their loved ones somewhere. Then they wouldn't see them. So the media became a time where we all came together because we were looking for people. We wanted to hear from people. As the days went on, we knew what the conclusion was, but then we all came together as a country. So that's a time that the media brought us all together. We still, every year, the station nightclub fire, we have memorials, the same thing that we do with 9/11, and it will bring people together. But these journalists that I'm talking to now and I'm teaching, they don't remember 9/11, so they don't have that feel. What do you think it is that's brought them together? Any idea what their 9/11 is, what their station nightclub fire is? Boston bombing. That was really the first thing that was either in their backyard or it was something that really impacted them. Okay, because this is a generation that loves to exercise, loves to run, loves to do all of those things. They had friends who were there. These students, of course, a lot of them were there because they lived in Boston or they were around the Boston area. But for them, it's where were you when you heard about the marathon bombing? And then this one, you may not know what this is. This is really when social media was used the most. This was the Virginia Tech shooting. And that was because it was really the first time that people used social media to connect. They used a lot of email. Okay, there wasn't Facebook then, and there wasn't that type of thing that we're familiar with, but there was a website called Friends that people used. Some people had phones that they were using. So really, Virginia Tech, that shooting was the thing that really brought social media online and brought people together. And because they were college students, they could connect with each other. Weather. Is it news? Right? How appropriate is it for today? Is it news to you? I have a husband who loves to sail, who loves to be outside all the time. So for him, he always woke up and he still listens to the weather radio. It's the first thing that goes on every morning. He still turns on the Weather Channel. So for him, he has always grown up saying that, it's the weather that's going to impact our day. It wasn't always that way. If you think about it, when you used to watch the news, there was that long block, we used to call it, the first half. And then you'd get a little bit of weather and a little bit of sports, right? And then as the years went on, what happened? The weather got maybe a little longer and the sports section got a little longer because they found out that men were watching TV more. Okay, so we have to put the sports in for the men. They forgot that women liked sports too, but we had to put that in. Then you'd see the weather block getting a little longer and weather became more important. And now how many times is weather the lead story? Okay? Not just because it's important, but I will tell you from a budgeting standpoint, because it's cheap. It's easy to cover weather, okay? It's easy to take your meteorologist and put them up first, okay? Because you don't have to put really reporters around it when you're talking about it. Now we have something called the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel started in 1980 by a meteorologist in Chicago, and another one in Baltimore, Maryland, that thought that they needed a devoted cable channel to weather, okay? Didn't go over so well. People really didn't watch it. 1982, more people were watching the weather. They were a little more concerned. Then we had a couple of hurricanes, right? And then the weather started to change, and then the weather started to impact what we did. And then we had Katrina. Right? And then we had the hurricanes in Florida. And a lot of people, as they get older, and especially people in Rhode Island, where do we go when the winter is here? A lot of people go to Florida. So a lot of people bought property in Florida. So if you were going to have these hurricanes, well, what did this next generation want to know about? What about my property? All these hurricanes, what am I going to do, right? So as the generations moved up, and as this once 18 to 34 generation became the next generation, okay, and they owned property in Florida and they got older, they were concerned about what was happening to their property. So you'd see the Weather Channel not doing just the weather, but then they started putting in all of these other shows, right? What is a hurricane? How does a hurricane start? What does a hurricane do? That type of thing. They started educating people. And then NBC said, you know what? Everybody's concerned about weather now, so we're going to buy the Weather Channel. So NBC Universal bought the Weather Channel. Well, then it became, you saw Al Roker in the morning, and now you've got meteorologists all over the place, and now it's wall-to-wall weather. But how many times do you turn on the Weather Channel and say, where's the weather, right? Why do planes crash was on last night. I said, we're expecting a blizzard, and I'm watching, why do planes crash? And at the bottom, you get that little strip. So they've kind of forgotten what their mission is all about. Okay, but I think you'll see them now start to go back. The Weather Channel also started naming their storms. So if you remember the last blizzard that we had, it was Nemo, right? So now you'll hear everybody for the next couple of days start talking about Nemo. And is this blizzard that we're supposed to get on Tuesday, it's going to be historic, and what's going to happen to everybody trying to get to the Super Bowl, and what's going to happen to the footballs in Arizona, and what's going to happen to everything. And they're now naming this storm. I think it's Juno or something, if somebody knows. It's the J storm. Okay, so everybody named hurricanes, right? That's where the naming came from. Now they are naming storms themselves, so you'll hear that through the Weather Channel. But weather has become news, has it not? It does impact what we do. We were laughing coming in here, but we were talking about getting your bread and milk. Okay? I mean, Doug White would come in to work, and the man never wore a coat. And he would come in every afternoon, and he'd come in, and he'd always put his head down, and he'd say to me, "Is it a bread and milk night?" And I'd say, "It's 2 loaves tonight." "Oh, good, we have weather." And then, you'd see him get under Gary Lay's skin, and, there'd be a lot of that playing. But it was about the weather. And really, it has become about the weather. So it is news. You ask what makes something newsworthy. Does it have impact or consequence? That's what we ask. Does it have conflict? Okay, if there's conflict involved, well, then it's probably news. Loss of life? Yes. Damage or destruction? That usually makes something newsworthy. What about proximity? If it's close to us, then we care about it, right? Prominence. Does it involve someone of prominence? Okay, is it a prominent place? Is it a location that we're all familiar with? From prominence has grown TMZ, has grown E! Entertainment, has grown Access Hollywood, right? All of these different things have come under prominence, okay? And as a result of prominence, because everybody now wants to know about Paris Hilton. Everybody wants to know about the Kardashians, okay? My husband always says, they're a group of people who have done absolutely nothing but on TV. And if you think about it, okay, they're famous because they're on TV, but they really don't do anything, do they? They're great marketers. That's really what they do. They market themselves, okay? So that's where some of those have come from. Is it timely, okay? What about timeliness? Is it something that we need to know now, okay? We need to know about the weather. Everybody now has what? A traffic reporter, okay? How sick of you of the traffic reporter who wears hardly any clothes, and you know that it's freezing out, and they're standing there pointing at 95 saying, things are going swimmingly, everything's great, okay? The Department of Transportation has cameras. You can log on yourself, you can look at Route 78. I'm at URI now, and I watch Route 78 to see what's going on, and my son will sometimes call me and say, hey, I'm at the lights at 78, watch to see if I go by. But you can do it yourself, okay? Novelty. What's the novelty of it? Okay? A lot of times. Doctor?
I think we're missing one thing.
What's that?
Sex.
Sex sells. Sex sells. That's true. That's true. And these students now, to them, there's no filter. You know, there's no filter when it comes to that. You wonder what programming is going to look like. Mm-hmm.
There's an old cynical comment that leads that leads.
Correct.
Comment on that?
If it bleeds, it leads used to be out there because that's how you got people into the tent, we used to say. That's not so much anymore because everything bleeds. If you think about it, you know, I mean, there's really nothing out there that is off limits. And that's where that term came from. It used to be if there was a fatal car accident, if there was something you could show pictures of that would draw in the attention, that's what you would put at the top of the news. I mean, every day there's a shooting. Every day there's something. We now have gotten to the point where how many times do you hear there was a shooting in Providence and do you really, it doesn't really faze you? You know, we've kind of come to that where we're filtering ourselves, what we're seeing, and we see so much of it and hear so much of it that it doesn't really impact us, which is that's not a good thing in my estimation. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that you then take that story and you bring it down to the people level, because that's when people start to pay attention, if you can make that story human. So it's not about the shooting that happened on Smith Street. It's about the person that lost their son or daughter. It's about the people in the neighborhood that now are putting up with this. So how do you make people feel like they need to know about it and they need to pay attention to it?
So how would, I don't disagree with what you're saying as far as that goes, but so why is it that every local news station has to report every house fire? I mean, in other words, I know it's a visual. I mean, is that the reason, just because it's cheap, it's easy? Because honestly, when a house burns in Smithfield, I feel very bad for those people, but it's not the same as a shooting necessarily. Sometimes
Right.
there's loss of life, but it's daily. We get every single house fire in the state.
And that's a great question. A lot of time it's just to fill the time, because they have time that they have to fill. A lot of times it's because they have the pictures, and if it's a TV station, they will use anything that has pictures. And now there are so many people that have these, that they send them pictures, that if you send them something and they don't use it, well, then you may not watch them. So think about, now, you watch starting tonight, all of these meteorologists are going to say, go to my Facebook page and post a picture of XYZ. Well, the reason that they're doing that now is because they got into trouble, because people would send pictures and you'd use them. Well, I remember one time we used a picture, it was right before I left, so it was 2009, and it was in February, and we had a snowstorm. And somebody sent us a picture, and it was all of these kids who were outside playing in the snow, and they were sliding down the hill. They sent us video. It wasn't still pictures. They sent us video. Well, for us, it was like, wow, this is great. Somebody sent us video, and we were able to get it, and we can see it, so we're going to use it. Well, unbeknownst to us, school was open in Johnston that day. Okay? Those kids were not supposed to be out sliding. They were definitely under 18. We had nobody's permission. And my phone rang at home at 9 o'clock at night from the superintendent of schools in Johnston, who wanted to know who to subpoena to get the video of the kids who were sliding, who were supposed to be in school. And you know what? He had every right to do that. And I said, you don't need to get a lawyer. You don't need to get a subpoena. Why don't you come tomorrow morning and meet me at the station at 9:30 and bring anybody you want with you, and we'll sit and look at the video together. Because he was absolutely right. We should not have done that, okay? But we were so excited with the technology, and we were so short-sighted with putting this on the air that we never thought it through. Okay, that happened several times. I'm ashamed to say, but I will definitely admit it. That happened a lot of times, that you would just get excited and put something on the air and not think of the consequences that it would have later on. Okay? So, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. Don't ever put something on TV that you show somebody's license plate in a fatal crash, at least until the next day, to let you know that next of kin has been notified. How many times does that happen? Okay? And it's just interesting, as I watch things happen, that people don't have those filters and they don't do those things anymore. a lot of times somebody will call me who still works there, and Mario Hilario called me the other day, and he said, "You wouldn't believe the story I'm on. You would never let us cover this." I had a rule: you never covered suicides. Okay? There was no need to. That didn't need to be the top story. Okay? If it was someone of prominence, you can report the death, but you don't necessarily have to report it unless there's something else that goes with that story. And there are times that suicides do need to be talked about, and you do need to tell that story. But for the most part, that's a situation that a family has to deal with. You have to realize that there are people attached to these things, and a lot of times people don't do that anymore. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves. And he said to me, "I'm going to interview a 13-year-old girl, and the mother isn't even home." I said, "Well, you better call the lawyers first and get them ready for it, Mario, because you know what that's all about." And he said, "And that's why I'm calling you." He said, "Because I just had to vent to someone." But again, it's a generation of instant gratification. I don't care what it means, just go and get me the story. Okay? And that's what I think we all, as consumers of news and media, have to be aware of. What is the source and where is it coming from? Okay?
Whatever happened, I'd rather be right than first.
That was the sign that I had in my office that said, it's more important to be right than it is to be first. That sign is with me now at URI because I took it with me, and they obviously don't go by that philosophy anymore. But I will tell you, it's something that I try to instill in all of these students, is that you can really damage your reputation as a journalist, the station's reputation, the newspaper's reputation, whatever it is, if you do not have the correct information. Okay? I'm looking at Dr. Ledbetter here, and I'll tell you a quick story. There was a state police officer who was shot 25, 30 years ago, maybe. Okay? So that was before social media. Happened, bless you, in Richmond.
Exit 3.
Exit 3. And Bruce Sunland was the governor. Edmund Culhane was the head of the state police. And I lived in Westerly. They brought him to Westerly. So they called me from work and said, "Hey, can you go to the Westerly Hospital and see what's going on and report to us, because we can't get somebody down there right away." So I went down and I sat in the waiting room, and the family was there. And it was a really touch and go situation. But everybody wanted to know. Right, and it was, it was intense being there. I mean, you were there in a different capacity trying to save someone's life, so that was the most important thing. But as a member of the media, it was uncomfortable for me because I kept thinking, wow, here's this young woman, and her husband is there, parents, and I believe the father was the East Providence city manager, town manager at the time. Right, at the time. So we knew him because in Rhode Island, that's one of the good things and one of the bad things about Rhode Island media. First of all, we know everybody. My parents are here, our friends are here, the neighbors are here, everybody's here, and this is great. And somebody said to me the other day, it was wonderful, I had a medical problem, and I went to the doctor and I said, I have a headache, and he said, you know what, we're going to check that out because I remember your father had this and your mother had that, and we're going to do that. And it saved her life. So, you talk about Westerly and how sometimes we're too close to each other, but it saved life, right? So then you look at Rhode Island media. Well, there's 6, 10, and 12, okay? And we're on top of each other, 6, 10, and 12, because there's only so much news to cover, right? We're the smallest state, so you run into each other all the time. So as a result of that, you know each other. Yes, you're competitive, but when things like this happen, you come together, you try to help each other. I can't tell you how many times Channel 6 would go to a house fire, and they'd go back, and the camera had frozen, and they had absolutely nothing. So I'd say, you know what, call them, give them the video. It's not like it's something exclusive to us. There was something in the camera in the courtroom where we would all share the same video, okay? We'd share the same things. So it would bring us together. The station fire, it brought us all together. There was post-traumatic stress after that like you've never seen. Same thing with journalists covering 9/11. This particular night, we're sitting there in the hospital. It's before social media. It's before cell phones, so you couldn't be calling back and forth. You had to literally go over and use the payphone that was in the lobby there. And I think about that night often because we had to get that information out. People had heard on the 6 o'clock news that night that a police officer had been shot, a Rhode Island State police officer, which was pretty rare in our area. And they wouldn't know until 11 what was going to happen, right? It was like one of those soap operas where you had to wait for the next day. You kind of had the cliffhanger. You went from 6 to 11 o'clock. And the governor sat there with us all night. Culhane sat there with us. And we waited and we waited. And I don't think it was before 11 that we had any information. I think it was later than that. And, you know, luckily, these men saved that man's life. And we were able to report that story. But as the media, we all came together because it wasn't so much about telling that story and getting out. It was thinking about the family that was involved, thinking about what had happened. And that was a great night for the media. And after that, Governor Sondland would sit and talk to any of us that sat there that night. He would always call on us first at a press conference. Colonel Culhane, I'm still, you know, every once in a while I'll look him up on the internet just to see where he is and what he's doing. I get notes from him every once in a while. But that cemented the relationship between the media and between officials that night because we all were just people caring about that particular thing. You lose that when you use social media. Just think about if that had happened now. You know, people would have been in their Facebooking, tweeting, giving updates, you know, I just saw a nurse walk in, I just saw this, you know, still nothing, the city manager is sitting here. You know, I mean, you get the blow by blow, you don't need it all the time. And that's one of the things that we need to text this next generation, that yes, it's nice to know all these things that are going on, but do we really need to know everything you ate? Do we need to see a picture of what you had for breakfast? Do we need to see the shoes that you have on? Do we need to know absolutely everything about you all the time? And that type of thing is filtering into our media world, okay? Because now you have TMZ, all right? You know everything that Taylor Swift is doing, okay? Everything. That poor girl, she comes to Westerly because it's where we all are, right? We choose to be here. It's a beautiful place. Well, she chose to be here. She happened to choose a very prominent spot and a house that you can see from the road, but she just wants to come here and be herself, right? But every time the poor person comes here, there are pictures of her that she's at McQuaid's. I mean, you can't go anywhere but what you know where she is every second if you're with somebody who's between the ages of 22 and 6, right? Okay, you know everybody's move. So we talk about when we use media, and we talk about Twitter and Facebook and what's happening, okay? And this is really what the next generation is using, and this is how they get their news. Okay, this is what they do. They get their news. But 84% of US adults are not Twitter users. Do any of you in here have a Twitter account? And do you use it very often?
I actually teach journalism, and I'm making my students get Twitter accounts to follow the news. So I have to up my usage.
Usage.
I have an account and I read it, but I don't
Tweet.
very often. So.
Right. This is something very new. If you haven't had this experience, try to get on Twitter just to see what it's like. I have it up on my computer during the day, and 20 minutes later, no word of a lie, I find myself, what have I just been doing for 20 minutes? I've just lost it because I have read tweets from 250 people. It's amazing how it takes you away from what you're doing. So I close it out. I close out Facebook. You know, they all have a reason. A friend of mine just passed away this week, and you know, they put the information up on Facebook and where you could give donations and when the services were and that kind of thing. Well, because people are all over the world from our class, it was nice to have that, and it kind of brought everyone together, and it was a nice thing. But I don't need to know that, you know, you saw a beautiful sunrise, or I don't need to know that 20 minutes later you don't like the person that's sitting next to you, or, you know, 15 minutes after that, you know, I decided that I'm going to buy a bathing suit online, and, What do you think? It's too much sharing sometimes. And I think that's where we have to watch it with media, because some of the sharing that's being done, again, it goes back to the source. What is the source and where is it coming from? Data usage by 2015. Study found that viewing video in the internet, which averaged fewer than 3 hours a month in 2008, nearly 6 hours a month last year, increased to 11 hours a month in 2015. Okay? They broke down the media into 30 categories. Again, Nielsen, Arbitron, ComScore, investor analyst forums. Some of you may have gotten letters in the mail over the years asking you to be a Nielsen home, to actually write the diary where you every day check what you wrote or what you were writing. Now they actually have people meters, right? And they put a people meter in your house, or people actually wear people meters now so that they can track what you're doing. So there are different ways of gathering data. Where do we consume media? I thought this was interesting because we always think that the United States were tops in everything. TV, daily distribution of screen minutes, the UK 148 minutes, USA 147, China 89. Smartphone, we think that we're on the phone all the time. Actually, Nigeria, 193 minutes, 151 for us, UK 111. France was the lowest with 79 minutes on the smartphone. Another one, when you look at laptops, you look Indonesia. Okay, who would have thought? We think that it's only us, but it's not. It's other parts of the world that are using media, consuming media all the time. And they're watching us. If anybody watches The Affair on Showtime, it was the #1 show in the Philippines this past week because they had bootlegged it and they had figured out a way to watch it. Okay, again, PC usage, tablet usage. How many of you have tablets? Okay, now we walk around with a tablet, a mini iPad, that type of thing. Quickly, the revenue picture. When we talk about the revenue, interesting numbers over here. As an industry, news in the U.S. generates roughly $63 billion to $65 billion in annual revenue, according to Pew Research. The gaming industry, video gaming, $93 billion a year. Starbucks, $15 billion in 2013, and Google alone generated $58 billion. Okay? Next weekend. Okay? Price tag, $4.5 million for a 30-second spot. Okay? NBC has sold out 95% of the avails. An avail is the availability. It's the number of spots. Okay, 95%. They now have so many people on the waiting list as a result of Deflategate that they're trying to figure out how they can get more commercials in. Just what we want to see, right? More commercials. The price depends on when it airs and the time period, how many times it airs. Locally, so Channel 10 only gets 6 available spots. So you know who you're going to see. The Cardis. I guarantee you next Sunday, one of the local spots will be the Cardis. Okay? 111.5 million viewers in 2014 of the Super Bowl. They know that this year it is just going to be way above that because of Deflategate and also because we have Seattle and we have the Patriots. So you have an East-West Coast, right, viewership. And the biggest, most expensive night for advertisers is the Super Bowl. So you ask, what's next? How could it change any more, right? How could anything else be there? Well, the FCC is looking at changes. President Obama is looking at what's going to happen. Is there going to be different cable rulings that are going to come out there? What's going to happen with cable? Advertising dollars, where they're going to go as you have different types of media coming in. Sometimes you'll look at the Westerly Sun, especially on a Monday night, and you'll say, wow, it's 4 pages. and you look at it and there aren't really a lot of ads in there, right? It's not just the Westerly Sun. You look at the Providence Journal, you look at the New London Day, you look at any of these papers, okay, where are those advertising dollars? You're not seeing Ruttman's on the back page anymore, okay? Probably because they're closed, number one. But, but number two, you're not seeing them because they need to be on social media. They need to be somewhere else, okay? You probably saw, if you watched Channel 10 recently, the Westerly Community Credit Union actually advertising during the Sunrise show on Channel 10, okay? You're seeing more local people getting into the TV advertising world because they realize that's how they have to get these people, right? You'll see changes in print. You'll see changes in online digital subscriptions. If you're used to getting Women's Day or Good Housekeeping or Oprah or any of those, how many times are they calling you or emailing you and saying, get our digital subscription as well, right? So you can look it on your tablet or something like that. What about the drones? Okay, have you seen them in the area? We took a walk to the lighthouse the other day and I said to my husband, look, there's a drone. You know, there it is. Somebody was just flying it. They got it for Christmas and they were just taking pictures. If you look at the Watch Hill Portrait of Seaside Village, the video that I did last year, those are drone shots that are in there. If you look at Carved from Stone and you look at the video that we have of the Smith quarries over here, those are from drones. We had permission. I called the churches and said, we want to fly over your cemeteries. We want to go to your cemeteries. Can we come in? You know, oh, thank you so much for calling, because people just fly these things and people just go in nowadays. They never ask for permission anymore. So you'll see more drones. Channel 3 in Hartford, they're in the middle of a pretty ugly lawsuit right now because they hire freelance videographers. It's much cheaper to hire freelance videographers and freelance journalists because you don't have to pay them benefits if they work under 18 hours a week. You'll see that in a lot of different careers these days. But these freelance videographers, in order to get paid, they have to be able to sell the video or sell the stories to these stations. And because it's so competitive, a lot of them have bought drones. So you had I guess it was maybe August, there was a fatal accident in Connecticut, and one of these freelance videographers, they closed the street off. They flew a drone, and they got the video of the accident, and they brought it back. And Channel 3 bought the video, and they showed it. Well, now the police are trying to sue them. Everybody's trying to sue them. The family's trying to sue them because they showed this video. And how did they get permission? How did they do this, right? So it's one of those court cases that journalists around the country are looking at. So you'll see more drones. How do you know that there's really a drone there? You're in the backyard sunbathing, and all of a sudden your picture is somewhere, right? Can happen. It can happen.
Well, what's the legality if it's not set, so they are allowed to do it?
Right now, they are, for the most part. For the most part. You'll see more states working on their own. It's the FCC and it's the FAA that's very concerned. Same thing with laser pointers. How many stories do you see, especially in New York and New Jersey? People have a laser pointer, you know, at a cockpit, pointed at a cockpit of a plane, right? So that's what's happening. Wearable technology. Any of your grandchildren, great-grandchildren get the Sony watch or get the watch? Fitbit, okay? How many of you got Fitbits? So now it's tracking everything you do, and then you can go on your phone or whatever and say, oh my gosh, I only walked 375 steps today, so you know, what am I going to do? Wearable technology, mobile payments, Apple Pay. Anybody go up and use, I have my Dunkin' Donuts card on here. I'm so excited. So I go to Dunkin' Donuts and then I can just pay like this, right? So you have that. HBO Go. Anybody know what HBO Go is? You can watch anything you want on the go. You can watch Showtime on the go. If you miss Downton Abbey, okay? I don't know, all these Sunday things going on. I keep taping Downton Abbey, keep hoping that I get to it one of these days. But you can now watch it any place, any time that you want. Okay, you can log on to PBS, and if you're a Cox subscriber, you just hit Cox, and then you put in your Cox password, and you can watch whatever you want. Okay, so on the go. Streaming music, you heard about Taylor Swift, Spotify. She pulled all of her music because of free downloads. People are downloading music all the time, not paying for it. What's happening? That's changing the way we do things. Social networks and video. Facebook, if you're on Facebook now and you're scrolling, all of a sudden somebody has posted a video of their dog doing something funny. Before you used to have to click on it to watch it. Now it just automatically plays. You get 15 seconds of video, whether you want to see it or not. There are some things you certainly don't want to. Instagram videos. Instagram, I'm sure that your grandkids, everybody has Instagram now. My daughter, I think that her hand is permanently attached to her hip because she's taking pictures of herself all the time. Instagram videos. And people were blogging. Everybody was a blogger. Remember, who's a blogger? What are we doing? We're going to blog. We're going to tell you all about something. Now they're vloggers because they're video bloggers. So you're going to hear this term a lot now. I'm a vlogger. I had a very interesting conversation with Sheldon Whitehouse, our senator from Rhode Island, and I'm a big proponent for a shield law for journalists nationwide, because there are some times that I think that you should not give up a source. You may recall that I was involved in a case with Jim Terracani when I was at Channel 10. Jim had a heart transplant. He was asked to give up a source. He did not. NBC backed us up on it. He was given 5 months of home confinement. It should have been jail time, but because of the heart transplant, he could not be around people who had any kind of viruses or anything, so he was given home confinement. So Jim and I still will go out and we'll talk about the importance of a shield law. So I said to the senator, I said, why can't we have a federal shield law? What is holding this up? Where are we? And he said, we cannot define who a journalist is. And he said, is a journalist somebody who has an ID badge that can go to the Iowa caucus? Is a journalist somebody who's sitting in their basement at 3 o'clock in the morning with Cheetos all over them, in their sweatpants, putting out information? How do we define a journalist today? So I will leave you with that thought. How do we define a journalist, and where do we get the information from?
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I was with my 3 grandsons who were 19, 17, and 14 over the holidays. And I said, I don't really like Facebook because it's too much information, but I got on it because my younger son told me that he really wanted to know what my nephew was doing in college to get on Facebook. And my God, it is interesting. But
some of the things you don't want to know that he's doing.
Right, but the 14-year-old told me that is totally passé because your grandmother's on it, and he's
Right.
only on Instagram.
That's it, and that's exactly right. Once we learn the technology and we get on it and we can follow them, they're on to something else. Because they don't want us to know. And if you think about it, I tell my parents stories now of things that I did that, thank God, there was no social media back then. Okay? They're here so I can say that. And I'm in that group that's the 50 and older, so I'm okay now. But seriously, think of it. But that's how we have memories. That's how we have stories. That's how we share things. When I get together with the Monahan son that I grew up with, we talk about all the fun that we had and all the things that we did. They don't have that because they share every moment of their life with everyone. So what's a memory now? Okay, is it the last thing that you saw on Facebook? What is it? And I think we have to look at that as consumers of media. What are we consuming? And it goes right back to the source. Where is it coming from? Any questions?
Betty Jo, I used to watch CNN because I could get a world view and a national view of the news in an hour, let's say. And now, if there is a tragic event, CNN covers it for days and days and days and doesn't recognize that anything else is going on in the world. Do you foresee a time or a station or anything that's going to be a place where we can tune in and get international news and without the biases of Fox or MSNBC?
Here it is. You have to find it yourself. This is it. It's not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. And it's I quite often say, and my husband gets sick of me saying it, but I'll say, he gets so upset because every morning something about Hernandez is on. And he'll say, I don't care if I never hear about Hernandez again. I don't care if I ever hear about this marathon bombing. I'm going to live it for the next 20 months or whatever. And he's absolutely right. Because what happens is that these big things are what they cover. Because people will tune in and then they'll come back to see it over and over again and follow it. So if you want just international news, you find the BBC. You find, I mean, NPR will do some of those things. But CNN, which was called Chicken Noodle News at one time, it's no longer what we thought it was going to be, because now you can go to so many places to find out just what you're looking for. So unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. 24/7 news, in my opinion, has ruined what the industry was, because you have to fill the time. If you say you're 24/7 news, okay, what about when there's nothing going on? You still have to fill 24/7, right? So what are you going to find? You have to find something and hang on to it. I mean, Malaysia Air, okay, we still have questions about Malaysia Air. It's a tragedy, but you know what? Malaysia Air 10 times a day is not going to impact my life. Okay, I'd like to know what else is going on. So in order for me to find out what else is going on, I have to go to multiple sources. And I think, Ellen, that's what you're going to have to do. Find other sources that cover what you want.
I have a question. I heard on the radio news, I keep CBS AM on at night when the lights are out and I'm trying to go to sleep. It puts me to sleep with all the stuff that, but a lot of it now is weather and traffic reports. It's changed all the time. The other thing is, I heard, I can't remember what station or whether it was TV or radio, that the mayor of Paris is suing Fox. And that's all I heard. I don't know, I guess whatever they did.
He's suing Fox News about the information that they gave that was allegedly false, and about the images that they showed during the Paris attacks. And that's what it is. And how many times do you hear now that somebody is suing someone? That's what's happening. We're keeping the lawyers employed, okay? Because everybody's suing someone because of the media and what they're showing and what they're doing. Channel 10 easily could have been sued by these parents of these kids in Johnston when we showed the kids that were out there sledding. It never came to that. But if you think about it, those are the types of things. And now here is this mayor in Paris who said, Fox, all of the things they reported were untrue at the time, and the images that they used were not images that they had permission to use. But as far as traffic and now, because what have we heard about all week? We've heard about footballs, right? That's monopolized our news.
There were some areas in Paris that were Muslim areas with Sharia law. There were no-go French police.
Right.
And that's what the lawsuit was about.
Right. But now they're also, I believe that they've now widened it, that some of the things that they showed were images that belonged to the police. And now that they've put them out there, they're afraid that other terrorists will find out different things that they've done. Yep.
Does Wall Street drive format and content?
Not anymore.
No.
It used to. It used to be that, you'd be very careful when you put out the jobless rate numbers, that you'd be very careful when you put out Walmart's prediction and did they make it or not. Now you'll see it 24/7. We're so driven now in the media by the markets overseas, especially oil. Look at oil, what's happened. Every day you hear about oil and the price at the pump. Well, what's really happening with all of that? So it doesn't really do it as much as it used to. At one time it did. Absolutely it did. There was a lot of responsibility that used to come with being a journalist. And I was always very proud of that responsibility. Unfortunately, there's even more responsibility now, but there are a lot of journalists out there that don't look at it as responsibility. They look at it as it's their right to be able to tell everything to everybody all the time. And I think that's where you're seeing that shift. And this is all my personal opinion, but I think that's really where you're seeing that shift. I mean, you said that you teach journalism students. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, I am. I'm seeing a lot less literacy and a lot more self-promotion and more sharing and it spills over.
You know, I mean, Dr. Ellen Madison, thank God for her, because she will correct everything, you know, for all of us. For me, it was radio. You know, I wrote my own scripts in radio, and you wrote phonetically back then. You say phonetically to anybody now, and they look at you like, what's that? But, you know, I'd have to write out different things and how you pronounce them, et cetera. Well, when you write your own scripts, you don't use grammar correctly. You don't use a punctuation, you know, and that's what's happened. Now, everything is OMG, right? And everybody's got some acronym. Everybody's got something. Right, Ellen, it must drive you crazy when you look at these things now.
I don't know what they mean.
Yeah. But
I'm still on BTW.
yeah. You know, but sentence structure, you know, ask somebody to write a sentence. I spend more time sending them to the peer tutoring session for English than I do teaching them journalism.
Well, television gave up adverbs about 40 years ago.
Yeah, well, Gene Valicenti, he doesn't know what a verb is. Did you have a question?
No, I was just in response to what she said. I cannot tell you, until very recently, I thought LOL was Lando Lake. I couldn't figure out why they were doing it.
I like that. I like that.
Is it me, or are the news people trying to be very dramatic in their presentation of the news now?
Well, if you think about it, when they say first on 10, or you saw it here on Fox first and you only saw it here, how many people have 3 TVs in front of them and they're sitting there saying, look, they had this first, they had this first, they didn't. Nobody cares, okay? And that's part of the drama, because they all want to take credit for first. And then part of it is now. Everything is now. A lot of what we watch is driven by the Boston television stations, top 5 market in the country. So whatever they do, it kind of filters here. And when I was at Channel 10, I used to say that we were the Paw Sox for the Red Sox, because everybody that I hired then went to Fox 25 in Boston. Okay, 90% of my staff, I would just say, we're training them to go to Boston. That's where they're going. So you can turn on all of these stations and see them all up there now. You can also see Catherine Tappan, who worked for me. She does NFL football now and NHL hockey. Dylan Dreyer, that you may see on the Today Show. She worked at Channel 10. Matt Lauer was at PM Magazine. Meredith Vieira worked at Channel 10. You know, Grand can tell you about all the people that she worked with that are now all over the world and all over the country. It's a great place to learn, but then they get to Boston and they all of a sudden forget about the viewer, and it's all about them. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the drama, and it's about them building a resume tape.
You gave us a little glimpse into what life is like as a news director when you talked about going into work at 11 o'clock at night and being on until 8 o'clock in the morning. Your job as news director has tremendous responsibility and decision-making requirements. But you were a woman in a job that was, in those days, almost exclusively held by men.
Mm-hmm.
So my applause and thank you for
Oh, thank you. Well, it was women like you, Pat, and Rona, and all of these women that came before us that actually opened those doors and broke that glass ceiling.
What advice do you give to young women today that we can pass on to grandchildren? Because it's still not easy.
Be true to yourself. I think you have to be true to yourself. Who are you, and who do you want to be? I learned as much from the managers and the news directors that I worked for that I didn't like. I learned how I did not want to be when I was a manager, as I did from those that I really admired. But I think that, you know, when I was named news director, it was, let's see, I think October of 2011. And I was there until, no, it was 91. And then I left in 2009. So I was the first woman news director at Channel 10 at 62 years old now. And I think that even today, people will say to me, you know, how did you break that glass ceiling? And I hope it was because I was fair to everyone and I treated everyone fairly. Whether they were a man or a woman that came into my office, I didn't care. It was, are you telling the truth? Are you doing the right thing? Are we telling the story the right way? And I think that that goes for whatever career you choose.
Well, it's a remarkable accomplishment.
Thank you. I was very lucky. I have great parents who supported me. You know, I had, yes. I have a 21-year-old son. Well, next week he'll be 21, and I have a daughter who's 18. And they really, you know, were the ones who helped me with my children. My father will tell a great story that we were in Mesquamaket. He has a convertible, and we were driving down the road, and we were in Weekapaug, and the phone rang, and it was NBC, and they said, you know, JFK's plane has crashed. Will you come to the Cape, and will you produce the live shots for us? And I was in the back seat of a car with 2 little kids, and my father said, go, we'll take care of everything for you. I was able to go to the Olympics in Australia because of that. I was able to go to the Soviet Union. I was able to see the Berlin Wall when it came down. I mean, I could not have done any of those things if I didn't have a support group back here. I had a husband then who was very busy in his career, and he was a great support to me. I had guts, and I've got to tell you, that's a lot of it. And I say to my daughter, who unfortunately chose journalism as a major at Quinnipiac, even though I've tried to talk her out of it, and you know, she'll say to me, but you did it, Mom. But you went and you did it. And I say to her all the time, Catherine, don't be afraid. If you put up that mask and you say, I'm afraid, I don't want to do it. If somebody asks you to do something you don't know how to do it, say, I'll do it. You'll learn. Baptism by fire sometimes is the best thing. You teach yourself, you get in the trenches, you know how to do it. Susan Brocato has a son who's in this wild business. You know, he's in the sports side of it, but still, you see it on the sports side. You know, you have to have support. You have to have, you know, people around you who support you. You know, I mean, Mrs. Monahan came today to support me. You know, I grew up with her kids. I have a wonderful husband right now who's a CPA. We couldn't be any more different. He balances me out, you know, and he's the one that will say to me, you know, if I get anxious about something, he'll say, well, wait a minute, let's look at it this way. You know, I mean, you need that. You need balance in your life. And I think that yes, you have to have guts, but I think you also have to have support and you have to have balance. Thank you so much for all of it.